Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Hot Seat this Friday, the 25th of April 2025. I think this is my first time to appear on this show this year. Am I correct?
Yes, you are.
Part of the problem is Museveni has mismanaged Kampala so much, all the roads are dead. It's so difficult to drive, walk, or ride to this place. I don't know how people have been getting here. So today I had to call the chief of traffic, I had to call the LC1 chairman, I had to call to the mayor, the executive director of KCCA. Finally, after driving since 3 p.m., I have arrived here.
Now, I think you have been doing some work for the
PLU.
Yeah, for PLU. Because we saw you somewhere.
Where?
Somewhere in the Cape with a general.
You need to ask.
I saw you with another president in West Africa as well.
What else? That's AI.
Yeah. Well, AI is very useful away from the discussion we have just been having.
Yes. Anyway, guys, let's first pay tribute to the Pope Francis.
Who are we?
Oh, I had forgotten. So I have a human rights Taliban here who has been defending the message of air. That message was framed. That is Jimmy Odoke. And of course, I have my great-grandson, Dismas Nkunda from Kisoro. Dismas and Jimmy, welcome to this show. So the Pope has finally died at the age of 88.
Finally died? It's as if you're praying that he died.
He's been sick for a very long time. You don't know. You know, I should, as an introduction, I should tell you, you know, in 2022, Ghana declared bankruptcy. They borrowed a lot of money.
Who?
Ghana. Mm-hmm. They declared bankruptcy as a country. Anyone they owed money, whether the multilateral institutions, private creditors, national citizens who had bought government bonds, everybody, they could not pay. So they said, anyone who holds government bonds, get off your phone so that we can listen to this very important information. And Uganda is headed to, is on the highway to Ghana. So they said, anyone with government bond, they will pay you only 55%. One, they're not going to pay for now, there is a freeze. But whatever money they owe you, they can only pay 55%. 45% accept it as a discount because we can't afford, we are bankrupt. They call it a moratorium. All these offshore investors and local investors who had bought government bonds were wiped out. Then the bilateral donors, they said we can't pay. But you know, because when IMF intervenes, it's a multilateral lender. It protects the multilaterals, ADB, World Bank and IMF. Only those will be paid. Because Ghana does not have money, IMF decided to give them loans to service the multilateral loans, but the IMF loan is interest-free. They give you money with no interest so that you can service multilateral loans.
Which are affiliated to the IMF?
Yes. So now, of course, the government was defeated. My favorite candidate, John Mahama, came to power, and one of the things we have been working on was reached out to the Pope. The Pope already had this idea that countries that are heavily indebted should be supported to overcome this debt burden. And one of the proposals that is on the table is that the country's debt can be not forgiven, but it can be converted into a fund controlled by creditors and the debtor country. It's converted into local currency, and then it's set aside to pay for social development goals. So the Pope was actually supposed to announce this in June, this initiative. The former Prime Minister of Italy, Gentoli, whom we have been working with, was appointed by the Secretary General of the UN as the head of the UN Debt Management Commission, something like that. So we were supposed actually to fly with President Mahama to Rome for this announcement, but the guy fell sick.
Who are we?
We, the people of Africa who believe we should. So we have a team that have been working with the Minister of Finance of Ghana, with the President of Ghana and many others, and have told you the former Prime Minister of Italy, Gentoli, on this initiative. There is a conference in Spain on debt where we are supposed to go. But now the death of the Pope, of course, has said this. He's the person who had the profile and credibility. You know, one of the most powerful cardinals in the Vatican is from Ghana and has been a very close personal friend to the current Pope. I'm hoping that the conclave elects him as the new pontiff.
Cousin?
Yes. But if he's elected, being from Ghana and the first country to speak of forgiveness, Ghana, it may look like tribalism. So I don't know. But the death...
There are another 2 African candidates.
So, but what is most painful to me is that the Pope has died at a very critical time when we needed to push this project through, and he was its spokesperson. He fell sick in January, so he could not articulate, he could not present this proposal. He has not recovered this until he died now. So for me, at a very personal level, it's a big, big, big loss.
Financial. For us, it's spiritual.
But the spirits also need the financing. I do not know if anyone goes to church and doesn't leave money there. God seems to be very broke all the time because he needs the tithe from everybody. So that is the first part about him, the debt relief, debt conversion agenda, which he was leading. The second part that I regret about his death, I found him the only Christian I have really listened to in the Catholic hierarchy, and even here in Uganda, in the sense that he recognized that he is a sinner, which is what the Bible says all of us are. And he rejected judging sinners. Remember when they attacked homosexuals, he said, but who am I to judge? You see. And if you read Matthew chapter 1, verse 1, it states exactly that. Do not judge others so that your God will not judge you. And I think verse 7 says, don't try to remove a speck from your friend's eye when you have a log in your own. So I see these priests of Uganda trying to remove a speck from homosexuals' eyes when they have logs in their own. They are cheating on their wives. They are stealing church money.
You also can quote the Bible.
I am one of the most well-read persons in the Bible. You didn't know?
I didn't know.
I'm a secular Christian. I have been preaching, yes. Isaac Kayonde has come very late. As a fine, you have to pay 1 million. 90% of which goes to the host. Then the 10% is shared by the others.
He's a politician, so he's been busy conversing. Gumba's finest.
Anyway, I found me giving a long dissertation about why the legacy of Pope Francis. So I found that very powerful. I found that Christian about him. I'm not a Christian by faith, but I'm a Christian by upbringing. So I can say I am a non-Christian Christian, what you call a secular Christian. I follow Jesus Christ the way you'd follow Karl Marx or Adam Smith or any philosopher. I follow him as a moral philosopher. So his teachings on tolerance, on forgiveness, on love, on charity, on so many things are so dear to me. Every day I aspire to uphold Jesus' teachings. Every day I fail only to recognize my humanity, that I'm just human.
So which sins do you commit?
All the sins in this world. All the sins. I am the worst sinner in the whole world. So every day I appear at the altar of God and say, look, God, I am so that I don't even I don't qualify to kneel in front of you to ask for forgiveness because I don't deserve it, but yet I still have to ask for it. Yes.
Amen.
And nobody judges you for that. You're human.
But these Ugandan bishops, I can tell you, and priests, they are the most unchristian people I have ever encountered in my entire life.
I don't want to comment on that.
No.
If I met them and one Christian convinced me that they read Jesus Christ and understood his message. Remember when Jesus Christ finds this lady who was being stoned for committing adultery and says, let who has not sinned cast the first stone, and everybody walks away. It was simply said, don't judge others. You get it? So when these Pharisees were going to the church and putting in so much money, and this lady comes with one, Luke says she came with a coin, Mark says she came with a baton, but Jesus said she made more contribution because for her it is all that she had. But there's so many, then these guys who used to go to the temple and pray, and everybody can see them praying, and this person goes and prays privately and he says, God, please forgive me. Say, this is the genuine prayer. You don't need to pretend to everybody that you're praying. So when I see these Christians parroting their prayers everywhere, shouting in churches, you can clearly see that this is a spectacle Jesus would not recognize today.
Really? I mean, for a man who led a crusade of over 5,000, surely.
Yes, but he did not believe that you need to exhibit your faith for you to be faithful. In fact, even he did not agree with this thing of going to the temple. Remember, Jesus was not a Christian. He was a Jew. He was born a Jew, was circumcised a Jew, was baptized a Jew, was died a Jew, was buried a Jew, resurrected as a Jew. Christianity came much later after him. Maybe think more than 70 years after Jesus, more than 40 years after his death. But let me come to the other issue.
You're not any better when you say these bishops, these priests. They don't. You just
the ones I read in Ugandan media.
Are you not doing the
you're also saying you're judge that you're also judging.
No,
them.
but I'm judging them by their words. They say they say, hang this one, kill the other. I mean, how do you, as a Christian, who is supposed to take people to the church for salvation, hand them over to the state of Uganda for punishment?
They talk about repentance, not hanging.
Okay, but let me ask you, really you are a Christian, a church leader. Your job is to shepherd the flock. Am I correct?
Yes.
If they go astray, you take them to church to receive salvation. How do you go to lobby Museveni? To use the instruments of the state, the instruments of repression and coercion, the police, the prisons, to punish homosexuals who should be in the church. You should be inviting to the church for salvation. I can't understand how a Christian can do that. You're abdicating your responsibility and handing over to the to the state. You're saying that the state,
I think it
should begin mediating and punishing sin.
I knew we were going to get there once we get into this religious debate, but I think you're exaggerating the extent at which they advocate that the institution of the church and its and the morals of the society should be guarded. Now, I think it's Father Rutiger or something like that who said that if the church is converted by the world, then certainly the church is not converting the world, right? His is simple. The church has a moral code which does not agree with homosexuality. They want to protect it. Their desire to change society into their religious morals is what they are doing. They are not saying go hang the homosexuals. They are simply saying that look.
Then my grandson, you know what I started saying? The bishops of Uganda and all priests, there were about 500 of them, went to meet Museveni to plead that he signs the Anti-Homosexuality Act.
Yes.
But
and
I
the
thought that for them,
Anti-Homosexuality
if
Act
somebody
said,
is
please kill them.
yes, okay, sign. They go to. Some are supposed to be hanged, by the way, under that law. Others are supposed to go to jail for life.
No, under aggravated homosexuality, that is equivalent to rape, according to our laws right now.
Okay.
Defilement and rape.
So this is what I'm saying.
Sends you to jail and
Yes.
life.
Let me ask you.
So why shouldn't it be
this sinner you're talking about? Why are you taking him to the state? Why don't you take him to the church for salvation? That's your role.
But I thought we were supposed
The other one is a role
to
for
be
the state.
discussing the death of the Pope.
Anyway, that's what you're discussing. I thought that's what you're discussing. Pope Francis rejected this. Pope Francis said for him, he cannot judge anyone. And therefore, two, anyone who goes against the things of the church is there to provide them salvation.
agreed?
But you know,
But the church cannot go to recruit the state to enforce laws against sin. That, as in fact, the bishop should be the one telling Museveni, please, these are our people. You don't need to punish them. These people need salvation. They don't need your terror. They don't need your coercion. They don't need your repression. They don't need your jails. They need our churches to save their souls.
the church,
and that's what Pope Francis was saying.
Agreed, but he did not condone what they were doing. He was very clear that let sin be condoned, right? But it is not for us to judge that sin.
But that's what we're saying.
I agree
he
with
did
you.
not call upon the government of the Vatican, because it also has its own army there, the Swiss guards. He called upon the government of Italy to go and arrest them. He felt that was a wrong thing. The church should take care of these people using prayer.
But you see, the problem,
and that's why I felt he was superior.
Competing interests in that particular area, because what if the strength of that particular group of people was too powerful that the churches felt that they can't manage the process of what they are doing? They can't even be able to help them, to save them.
Why?
So also, you know that.
So if the church feel they have failed, they have to recruit to the state.
Well,
to enforce the will of the church.
Yes.
But then,
the
okay,
church,
let me ask you this. Let me even assume they were right to do so. What of those who don't believe in the church, who don't believe in God? Why should they be subject to, assuming I am an atheist, I'm agnostic, I'm a Buddhist, I'm a Hindu, why should I be subjected to the cheatings of the Bible?
By doing what?
No, I'm saying if the church recommend a law, the law does not distinguish, not saying punish only Christians.
Yeah, so, because they also recognize that they are not only Christians.
The law was not passed only for Christians, it was passed for everybody. So if the Christians lobby for it, but on using the Bible, but the Bible is not a universal belief for everyone.
But the point is, what do you expect them to do? They are lobbying for that which they are responsible for.
A cardinal who says he hopes the next pope takes a different approach on this. So there was people disagreed. It was not
Like, for
They were
example,
not seeing on the same wavelength on that.
Yes,
they
I
had
agree with
differences.
you. In fact, I think
But
his position
the Pope-
in the Catholic Church was the minority position, but he had the courage to state an enlightened position. That's why I love that man.
Okay.
Yes, and for many other reasons. This one among them, you know.
So you can talk about his. Like I felt those two things were very important. Oh, we have taken a break, I'm told, and we'll be right. Welcome back to the edition of the Hot Seat, featuring a panel with three most experienced panelists and journalists to discuss the major events of the week. I have Jimmy Odochi. He is a human rights Taliban. I have Isaac Kayonde. He's going to run for parliament, and we are supporting him under PLU. If he doesn't join PLU, we will withdraw our support.
Yeah.
Then we have...
he's already PLU.
By conscription, I mean.
Yes, everybody's PLU. Whoever is not PLU is not a Ugandan. So we strip you of your citizenship when you don't support PLU. So now, the legacy of the Pope.
So
Pope Francis.
Pope Francis, you know, he was Archbishop in Argentina. He was from the Catholic religious order called the Jesuits. So their kind of training is really, really different. He was for social justice. He cared about, you know, immigrants. It was a very big thing in his papacy. And, you know, he was concerned about conflicts around the world. When he came to Uganda, his African visit, the apostolic journey in 2015 began from Kenya. Then he came here. Then he went to Central African Republic. Who would imagine a religious leader like the Pope going to Central African Republic? But he was concerned about conflicts around the world. And his comments about the Palestine, you know, Israel conflict. So he will be remembered for even South Sudan. He went to South Sudan when Riek Machar and Salva Kiir went to Rome, to the Vatican. The act he did showed how humble, his humility is what is really
like
admired.
The shoe of
yeah, that shows how to go, Lord, trying to show them how you should be.
Remember Jesus, I think in the Gospel of Mark, washes the feet of his disciples. Yeah. So it is you have to be a servant of the people.
It's a very good symbolic thing, but you know, for other people they can view it differently.
Well, he was just showing how low you should get to try to. Even when he came to Uganda, you know, he was the kind of car he was not these SUVs. His approach, you know, and simplicity. He wanted, you know, to be as ordinary people, not to be. But you know, the Pope was also a rector in a seminary. He was a professor of theology. But he wanted to make things simple for everyone to understand and to be practical in their
the
needs.
life of Jesus.
Yes, and he was always telling the priests not to take so long in their homilies. People get bored when you preach and you begin talking very, you know, theological, big terms, and make it simple for you know, the congregation to understand.
That's why the Catholic Church it's exactly 45 minutes.
Yeah, it was his emphasis that, you know, you don't come and tell stories, begin your political things. And when he came, he went to that Nalokolongo place for the
disabled.
Yes, for that charity. So he cared for the handicapped. He would stop by when there was a sick person, you know, hug them. And so his simplicity, you know, his care for the ordinary people, really. And when he became Pope, he didn't go to that palace and what. He was actually staying in a guest house.
In a chapel.
He's in a guest house. He would cook his own food. So you would see that.
Although the quarters for the Pope in the Vatican are very simple. Live in a small apartment.
But that he started when he was in Argentina, that would take the train, you know, public transport. People would meet him in the subway. And he just wanted. Well, I wanted to join the Jesuit. I wanted to join.
We can see. Dismas.
Well,
the memory of the man.
One of the things that what Jimmy spoke about that I was me in my field of work was the protection of immigrants, because he really emphasized it a lot, and well knowing the numbers of the people that we have.
No wonder he was himself an Italian migrant into Argentina.
Oh yeah,
yes.
So that's the reason. So I do think that he was a good Pope. He was easier to interact with people. Easier to. I saw when he came here, he went not only to Nalukorongo, he went even to Munyonyo, where there is that.
Yes.
So he was greeting ordinary people when he rode on that road going to Seta, because they took him to set up to So he'll be missed. And I'm hoping that he can be replaced by an African pope.
No chance.
Why don't you hope that he's replaced by a good pope?
No.
Yes, just a good pope. Just a good pope.
African popes bad.
I am not interested. No, I'm not interested in the color of the skin of the successor. I'm interested in the one who is Christian.
Exactly.
Let me tell you the story of the first. The many popes have been progressive, but the last progressive pope had been John the 23rd. He died in 1958. He had started the Vatican Council too and wanted to carry out reforms, and the Vatican Council too had dealt with issues of contraception, so many elements that have been problematic in the church. So when he died, when John the 23rd died, the conclave elected Archbishop Paul Montini, who was Archbishop of Milan. He became Paul VI. Paul VI reversed all the reforms. Actually, John died in 1963. So he was replaced by Cardinal Montini, Archbishop of Milan, who became Paul VI, who reversed all the reforms. He stopped the Vatican Council too, but not only that, he stopped all the reforms until he died in 1978. Then the cardinals elected Cardinal Albino Luciani, who was Patriarch of Venice. Albino Luciani was the first pope. When they approached him, asked him, "What is the name you want?" He said, I will be called John Paul I. He was the first pope to get two names, to give himself two names, and also even to mention that I'm the first, because Pope Francis is really Francis the First. But like this movie, you see the Equalizer or Rush Hour, when they do, the first one succeeds, then they create 2 and 3, but one was never there. So, but for him, he emphasized the first. When they asked him, he said, first, I was made bishop by John, and I was made cardinal by Paul. So that's why I take those two names. So he proceeds to he begins trying to conduct a reform of the Catholic Church. On the 33rd day of his papacy, he was killed by the Vatican Courier, the administration there. The mafia controlling the Vatican killed that very nice man. He was called a smiling pope. So he's replaced by Cardinal Carlo Wojtyla, who was Archbishop of Warsaw. He became John Paul II. He was his personal friend. When this man came to the Vatican, he was told, "Don't dare. That's why your predecessor could not survive." He bent to the pressures of the Freemasons and the mafia. So he survived. When he died, Cardinal Ratzinger came in. Cardinal Ratzinger, he was Archbishop of... He was actually not an Archbishop, he was a Cardinal in the Vatican itself.
Benedict XVI.
He named himself Benedict XVI. Yeah. But his name was Cardinal Ratzinger. Yeah. When he was there, he does an investigation and finds a rotten church filled with corruption, brigandage, bribery, murder, assassination. When they gave him the report, he said, "I cannot stay in this place. I'm too old and frail at this time to fight these battles." For the first time in 600 years, a pope resigned. He resigned. So, but people who want reform in the church are always looking for a progressive. They use the conservatives and the progressives. They elected this man, Francis. Francis started speaking out of turn, but I think he was also advised. There are many things he wanted. He wanted priests to marry. He wants Catholics to use contraceptives. He wanted to recognize the rights of homosexuals and all these kinds of things. But the pressures inside the church were, now he has died. We are hoping that his successor is able to stand up to the conservatives and maybe push the church further. Now you can proceed from there, Isaac. We wanted to give the history of the church. The last,
thank you for
from
that.
From 1963 to now, which is 60 years.
You are really good Catholic.
Yes. Yeah, well, thank you for the history.
Although some Catholics will disagree with the reforms and all. They don't say it's reform. No.
For me, focusing really on his political journey, I mean, his political activity. I mean, for me, he was a leader, he was a diplomat, and spirituality came like third when it came to sorting out world issues. I mean, when you look at the conflict in the Middle East, he was very firm on asking the Jewish community to cease fire, stop the war. He was for two-state solution. He was, he was progressive in that sense. He came to Africa. He apologized for the genocide. I think that was something that was long overdue. The Catholic Church, its role in that in that genocide. Then here he came. I had the opportunity to go and see him at Kololo, and I can honestly tell you, I have never felt
in the presence of
the Pope. I have never felt that power, should I say?
Not even
on a spiritual.
Not even with the president.
No. I had seen pictures of my uncles and aunties in 93, I think 94. 93, yes. With the Pope who came, but there was something about this man. He came,
John Paul II.
Yeah, John Paul II. So he came in his Pope mobile. He was all white. There was something about this man that I have never experienced. I usually see people, fall in these Protestant churches and everything. And there was a lady who I'm not Catholic, by the way. There was a lady who came and was drunk.
So what do you go to do when you are not a Catholic at Corona?
That's the thing. That I was just intrigued. I really wanted to see and have the experience of the Pope. Anyway, so it was he has always been his social issues, I think, for me, were the ones that were outstanding. When he came here, he was talking about corruption and human rights, Kenya corruption, South Sudan, the war. So I feel like he played his role as a head of state of the Vatican, and his diplomatic work will always be remembered.
We're taking that break.
We may say,
welcome back to the edition of the Hot Seat, featuring a panel with the most experienced journalists and panelists to discuss the major events of the week. I have Dismas Sinkunda, Isaac Kayonde, and Jimmy Odochi. Guys, I want us to discuss a great man called John.
Why don't you say, may his soul rest in eternal peace for the Pope?
You have said it.
Yeah. Yes.
So let me begin from the beginning. May Kazoora's soul rest in eternal peace. John Kazoora, who among you here knew him?
Yeah.
Okay, so I begin with you, Dismas. Tell us about John.
Well, what I know is that John left Makerere and in 1982 and joined the Bush, and when he came back after the capture of power, of course he was a soldier. I think he died at the rank of a major, right?
He retired from the army at the rank of a major.
And then he disagreed, of course, with NRM and joined the opposition. I used to see him. He used to come to lunch around my office in Nakasero. And he was a very nice man, greeting people, chatting, and remembering even when, you have never been in a political circles with him. So to hear that he has died when he hasn't... But at least I'm happy that Museveni has recognized that, and he sent there the deputy speaker to represent him, to be able to deliver the message from the president. So maybe in his death there is some reconciliation.
But I should also tell you, actually, there is a couple of years ago when Kazoora was badly critically ill, the president did send him abroad for treatment. Yeah. Museveni is a unique animal, generous,
even when you disagree with him. I don't know why for Besigye doesn't extend the same kind of, let him out of prison. So
Besigye wouldn't take it. I think sticking on the Pope's visit was the first time Besigye shook hands with President Museveni after 15 years. So in that regard, the Pope did his job. Whether it will continue.
But then when he dies and the man is still in prison, what does it mean?
No. I'm just saying it was symbolic at that time.
But I also don't think you understand you, Jimbo. You're driven by your emotions.
Yeah.
First of all, I should tell you, before we come back to Kazoora, about Besigye, I think that Museveni took Besigye for trial in the military court-martial because he did not want to take him to High Court where they would always charge him with treason. They charge him with treachery, in which case they would have leg room to play. If you are convicted of treason, and I will convict Besigye, I can promise you that, you will face a death sentence. And Museveni did not want to put him, and Besigye can never ask for mercy. So in which case Museveni did not want to place himself in a situation like that. So he wanted a court where he has control, and Besigye stupidly went to a court where Museveni has no control, which may not be a very good thing for him. But you can come talk about John Kazoora.
John Kazoora, well.
How did you know him?
I met, he was a friend to my father, and
they were together in Parliament.
Yes, they were together in Parliament, and I think in 2001, my father used to run a printery, so we did most of his posters and everything. At that time, he was still NRM. I remember he was never NRM. He was in the movement. Okay, he was in the movement, but I remember his manifesto. Part of his manifesto, he had a collage of pictures. And the pictures were full of him and President Museveni, and him in President Museveni's the presidential jet and everything. Like he fronted that image of I am in the system. I am, I'm a soldier and I have done this and that. And then later, of course, I kept meeting him with my dad. He would come for meetings or whatever it is. He was quite a very blunt man. He said it as it is, and he was always very clear about what he wanted. I think then I had an opportunity again, went to his home once, and he was a very jolly and very friendly guy. So for me, I think politically, of course, his book, is one that will leave many to wonder. But for me, posthumously, I have seen the comment from Augustine Ruzindana that has got him so much backlash on Twitter.
What did Ruzindana say?
No, Ruzindana said John Kazoora had quit opposition politics or something like that, but was more enlightened and didn't have his naive views anymore. Now, those who interpreted it to mean that, okay, John Kazoora was no longer in opposition, and then they went on to bash him, all these things. They kept quoting his book, that phrase and everything. So, I don't know. We don't know the man in his last few years and how what his political views were. His legacy will be left in that book that he wrote.
Jimmy Odoki.
Unlike
the leading human rights Taliban.
I never met him. I know.
You are so unlucky.
I know the young Kazoora who was here, a presenter, closely related to him. But his book, Betrayed by My Leader, I thought it's a very bold thing to do. Most people who disagree with Museveni, those who are in the NRA, very few of them write about their point of departure or their whole stories about fighting. And I've not read the book. I'm now more interested in reading that memoir. But I think it's a good thing. And also, having been part of the FDC in the beginning, I think he was the secretary when the party was being founded in 2005. So he made a very good contribution, because very few people, even when they disagree, to directly cross and to be seen as working with the opposition, it's a hurdle. It's not people have the strength to do that. So having worked, he was in ISO before, deputy director in ISO. He was special district administrator.
Yes.
So he held very important roles.
Was the SDF for Kampala, right?
I don't know which district, but he was a special district administrator and deputy director in ISO, and having fought in the Bush War. So he was a man, he made really contribution in both fronts, with the opposition and with the NRA. So
I should tell you that I knew Kazoora very well. I've not been in touch with him over the last 10 years or 15 years, but between 1996 and let's say 2006, I used to meet him on a regular basis. So those 10 years, I had dense interactions with him. As a younger reporter, I covered Parliament, but I never sat inside Parliament to do parliamentary reporting, because everybody could go and get the story on the floor. I was interested in what are the intricacies that happen, the organization, the maneuverings, the plotting, the planning, the strategizing that shapes the debate on the floor. That was my interest. And John Kazoora was a very important source of analysis. I have very few people I know in Uganda who can give an insight into politics and the things that motivate people in politics better than that man, John Kazoora. So I was his student and he was my teacher. I was his mentee, he was my mentor. I looked to him every time. I don't know this guy from Uganda, Guma Gumisiri, whether he's still there.
He is.
Bernadette Bijirwa.
Yes.
She died in the 90s. I was very, very close actually to Bernadette. If you go to Jack Bijirwa, Jack Bijirwa. If you go to their home in Bushenyi, and I think it is in Kabwohe, I even used to have a self-contained bedroom in their home. When they were building it, they put for me that. That's how close I was to the family. So their kids, Sane, Brian, and the girl, what is her name? She went to England and never came back and has lived there. Jackie. They were like my siblings. I was very close to them. So I knew Kazoora because I was also interested. The politics of Ankole was shaping the politics of Uganda. And so I spent a lot of time talking to him. Now, I'm going to take another break. When we come back, I want to speak about my experience with him because it was long and intense, and I learned a lot from that man.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you were mentioning names of that.
Yes, of course.
When you were mentioning the names of the 6th Parliament, that Parliament was something. Like
It was
something.
It will never be the same.
It will. I don't know.
It is NRM and its idealism that was driving that.
Man.
And
but the characters that were in that Parliament.
The characters. But for me, I remember the beginning.
So, but I don't see this. What you're saying.
No.
I guess it was
check. It's
I'm
there.
looking at his what? His posts.
Yeah, no, it's there.
It does not say those things. I have it.
It does. What does it?
He says General Kazoora, along the way the political challenges developed on the way forward, and what was an internal and antagonistic contradiction was handled as if it was an antagonistic contradiction, and cadres who had no desire to exit the movement were driven out in a manner that forced some of us. It was never voluntary.
That's the
challenge.
That's the second tweet. There's another one. The first one he sent.
But where is it?
Check it. I think it's there.
Oh, here it is. I have learned sad news of the passing of my friend John Kazoora when I'm very far away. When I was asked to come on the phone, I promised to visit him at his home where he had shifted. But unfortunately, I hadn't visited him, hoping to do so when I come back from my travel out of the country. My visa will expire in a few months, so I had to use it at this time. That's the reason for my sudden travel. However, Kazoora was a rare person, and it was a privilege to have known him as a friend, a colleague, and a comrade. Whatever he did, he excelled, especially if it demanded leadership, determination, and dependability. I'm very sad that I will not be able to be there for his last journey. I'll miss him. Friends, colleagues, neighbors, country miss him. And of course, his family. I don't see that comment. But if he posted it, he is very, very correct.
You check, you keep, it is there.
I'll look for it.
Yeah, you look for it. It's a long post.
Stand by. Welcome back to this last segment of this edition of the Hot Seat, featuring a panel of these experienced journalists and pundits. We have Dismas Nkunda, we have Isaac Kayonde, and of course, Jim Odoki. So, I want to give my own take on John Kazoora because I knew him at a personal level. And for the years, as I already mentioned, between 96 and 2006, I spent a lot of time with him. So, let me first give his history. Actually, Kazoora would have been one of the top leaders of the NRM, but somewhere things went wrong. Because when he was appointed the DA of Kampala, district administrator at that time was a very powerful and influential position to be a DA. Yeah. And to be put in charge of Kampala shows the kind of trust Museveni had in him and his own profile within the NRM. Then he became Director General of Internal Security Organization. And then I think General Jim Muhwezi was a Khan at that time. He left to go to Russia for training, and Kazoora became acting Director General, I think for a whole year. When Jim returned, I think there was a conflict between him and John Kazoora, and I think John was dismissed and even charged with corruption or something. He was even taken to Luzera, actually. So at that moment, there was Kazoora, I think, developed a feeling that the NRM Museveni and the NRM had not been fair to him. That begins his skepticism about NRM. So in 1994, he contested and he asked for leave from the army. He contested and is elected as a member of the Constituent Assembly. The Constituent Assembly delegates, we call them cards, representing Kashari. In 96, he runs for parliament and wins in 2001. So I meet him in 1996.
Didn't he lose the 2001? He lost 2001. He was CA and then...
And the parliament, then he lost in 2001, yes. He was defeated. He was defeated by Aban Tebamanya. He was defeated by Aban Tebamanya. Anyhow, So I feel like he had already developed his experience of being arrested. He felt it was unfair, unjustified, and crooked. His arrest and trial, which took him to Luzira. But he remained an NRM person, and he had all the idealism of the NRM. So in the 6th Parliament, 1996-2001, he was a much more cautious supporter of NRM. He was not willing to offer his everything for it. He was now a much more critical supporter. And this is the context in which I met him. Because I was not covering what was happening on the floor of Parliament, I was covering the maneuverings that take place. So he was always able to give me important insights in what was happening, what NRM was planning. And the first person to begin articulating this view that Museveni is not going to leave power, that Museveni is going to stay in power till he dies, it is Kazoora who begins articulating it. I used to write a lot of articles on this subject that Museveni will not leave. But heavily influenced by Kazoora.
Yeah, but then again, like I said, in 2001, he was heavily a supporter of the movement. But after that loss, that is, for me, that's why I say.
Well, let me come to this, Isaac. Actually, no. So, by 1997, a big rift begins within NRM. Under the chairmanship of Patle Chigongo and Bidandi, NRM leaders were meeting. So you could talk of Geria Kategaya, James Wapakabolo, Amanya Mushaga, Kahindo Tafir, whichever leader of NRM that you know, especially from Western Uganda, with the exception of 2 MPs I can talk of, Amama Mbabazi and Rakana Rugunda. All these others used to meet under the chairmanship of Chigongo in Kololo. Sometimes they would meet at Mushaga's house in Bugolobio. They meet at Kategaya's house in Bugolobio or Tafiris. But they would meet to say certain things are going wrong. This is the time when we have this privatization, corruption in privatization. General Salim Saleh buying a Uganda commercial bank and grain milling and things like that. These are the days when we have purchase of junk helicopters. These are the days Kutes has now come into cabinet as Minister of State for Planning. And the many NRM people begin feeling that Museveni is moving toward his family. I think because at that time is recruits people into the army, and there's a story in the Crusader
LDUs.
LDUs, yes. These things begin raising concerns. And in fact, Besigye was one of the participants in those meetings. Besigye's breakaway into when he writes that document in 1999, it was an opinion of a broad section. In fact, 80% of the top leadership of the NRM was behind that document. The difference between them and Besigye during those discussions, some people said no, us, the top, no, that this revolution is going wrong, the president is off the rails. The masses don't know. We will, and we campaigned for me in 96. So we cannot just go there and tell them, now we have changed. People will not understand us. They will stick with Museveni. And Besigye and I think Medan Sali were arguing, no, maybe we should go, since Museveni had already promised him not to run again, let us go to him and say we are proposing Wapakabolo as a candidate. So many things were discussed. But in those discussions, because they're not going anywhere, Museveni was getting reports of these meetings taking place, and he was already playing divide and conquer among them. So Kazoora was one of those who remained loyal to this cause. But when Besigye broke off in 1999 and wrote that document, Museveni tried to try him. I think Kazoora was very loyal to the Mushagas and the Kategas as his leaders of this movement. He stuck with them because he felt, no, it's mature. Museveni has his second term. Let us allow him run for his second term. We will not condemn Besigye, but we will, because Besigye is raising issues we agree with. But let us ensure that we elect a strong parliament where Museveni cannot amend the constitution to remove term limits. So there was a lot of mobilization to ensure that members of parliament will be of such profile that they cannot amend the constitution to remove term limits. Kazoora was deeply involved in that. There were meetings held at Rwachitura between Museveni and the Ankole group, where they raised these complaints to him. Kazoora was one of the key speakers in those meetings. And this led Matembe, you see. Yeah. Kazoora and Matembe were very close friends as well. And Uguma Gumi Siriza. So they were kind of, I would say, the progressive wing that felt the revolution should be kept on its rails. And all this time, I would be with him. Then, in 2001, what you're saying, to win, he also notices that the top of the mountain had seen the mistakes that this revolution was going off the rails. But the bottom people in the valley, who is the majority, the pyramid is bigger down, had not seen this. So Kazoora must have campaigned what you're saying as a typical NRM person showing his identification with Museveni. It mattered for his constituency, not because he was convinced about it.
True.
So when he's defeated, he's among the people who are behind, what was it called?
Reform agenda.
A reform agenda. From reform agenda, it comes and merges with PAFO. Oh, yes. He becomes, they form FDC. He becomes a critical member of the FDC. So his journey away from the NRM becomes very strong. But, and this is what I have not seen Ruzindana must have done, but I feel like along the way, Kazoora got frustrated. He found there are so many wrangles, quarrels and recriminations inside FDC that the progressive agenda he hoped for wasn't there. There was less tolerance of dissent inside FDC, and this he told me, than it was in NRM. Of course, in NRM they were chased from there because they disagreed. But the place where they went, the virulence against internal criticism was even worse than in the NRM. When many people of FDC could see a person like Ofondo Pondo goes on TV, criticizes NRM, or this man from Rwemiyaga, Sechikubo, there's this man from Kabale, from Kibale, there's a Mchiga man from Kibale. Not Mujuche. There's another NRM guy, Krika Simire. They could stand and speak against NRM and they remain. There's a time my mama and Babas wanted to chase them out, but Museveni would bring them back in. So Kazoora started saying that the cause for which he had fought, what he had left NRM, I mean, the very problems were there. He also started witnessing that all these other leaders who had formed the FDC, whether it was Mushega, Augustine, Ruzinda, these enlightened people who are polite, who were sophisticated, begin quietly withdrawing from FDC. Some like Bet Kamya go back and join NRM, right?
Let me read for you the statement.
Yes, first of all, Kazoora begins keeping quiet and much more quiet. He begins to realize that we are running from the frying pan, jumping directly into the fire. He sees people like Ingrid Turinawe, and so some riffraffs are the ones that messages are sharing with, and all these other leaders.
No.
Wow, please. But at least the senior enlightened leaders have been eliminated. So by the time Kazoora dies, I'm so unlucky that I did not have these conversations with him in the last few years. But the times we met between 2016 and 2021, he was already expressing this idea that Besigye himself is not even tolerant of anyone who criticizes him, and he would prefer to work with people of less intellectual quality, because yes men, rather than work with people who can make any form of criticism of him. But you can read what he
wrote here. People will write that he was NRA MP, first Kapalara DC equivalent, ISO director, FDC, etc. But by the time Honorable Major Kazoora died, he had gone through all that and he was an independent person, still political, but with no more illusions. Please don't attach labels to him.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Because this one he told me, he felt that Besigye was the worst version of Museveni, and he quietly withdrew. Yes. He was no longer willing to go to the public and contradict himself, but he felt he should withdraw. And he became
what does that tell about
illusions?
About him as a person?
As a person,
yes.
He had been an idealist, who was humbled by reality. Yes,
maybe that's how you can
what
put
if it was much more than dissatisfaction?
I forgot to mention, he writes his book, Betrayed by My Leader. You should read that book, because in that book, actually, he talks of the series of meetings that take place under Museveni's leadership, chairmanship, at Rwachitura and in other spaces with these NRM leaders, where Museveni reveals a lot of his inner feelings about where he says that he put there Kazoora as vice president to appease women, to appease Basoga, and to appease Catholics. Otherwise, she's a nuisance. Museveni does not appoint you because of any management or leadership competencies you have, but because you deliver a vote. Yes, he appointed Jeje Odongo as a commander because the Bateso are happy. But there is a way Museveni degrades the very people he has appointed and to positions of leadership. And in fact, when I read Kazoora's book, I said, okay, so Museveni really kind of...
But isn't that the truth?
Is it?
First of all, I should tell you, for me, I don't mind. You can get a Catholic who is a Musoga and a woman who is competent. So you can both win the political support and still get management competences.
But
for you to say that management competences was irrelevant and this political vote was all there was.
Andrew, for him, he doesn't need anyone who is competent.
Not necessarily.